Yeah. But I was in a halfway house with a guy one time.
We're live, just so you know.
Okay, I don't mind. I tell it all. He had been locked up for 20-something years. And, he was a heroin addict and killed a guy accidentally, but still caught some time for it. But then prison, heroin's a great way to do prison time. And so it was terrible. He couldn't get off of it long enough to act right, get his class back. And by the time he got out, he did finally got out, and he went to a friend of his house, rolled out to it, and he's sitting there, and the phone rang. They've already been sitting and doing what people do when they first get out of prison. And the guy looked down at the phone and said, "It's for you, it's so-and-so." And he was like, I had no idea how he knew it was for me or who was calling, because he had never seen a caller ID before. Right? And so, that was a mystifying thing to me. Well, I was almost that way about social media when I got out that last time, because I had been homeless for a long time before then. Even though I wasn't in prison, I separated myself from the progressions that most people were going through. And so it was a wonderful thing for me, because even though I smelled bad and lived outside and I didn't have nice clothes or whatever, I could still get in touch with people that I had known for a long, long time and interact with them socially and putting on my best face. And so that's part of my return to the real world, was that social media thing where I could stand outside the room. They didn't have no idea how high I was, or how drunk I'd been the night before, or how bad I smelled. And then I started meeting all these different people around the world, literally around the world. I was encouraged to write. I had been writing a long time, my whole life anyway, but I had, on the streets, had really started to write poetry seriously. And I went to high school with a girl who got her citizenship in England after high school, and she's still there. And she was one of the first ones that I chatted to a good deal. And she was an English major, I was an English major. We talked about so many things. And I was, at the time, I was wanting to be serious. And so I was going and reading the big guys, the ones that they teach in college. Yeats and Keats and the guys that the romantics and the French guys, all those, and I was trying to emulate them here and emulate them there. And I said, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it. I can't write like them. And Carla said, "Well, what's wrong with writing like you?" And I had it was just like a little epiphany moment. And from that moment on, I feel like that I can kind of shift a little bit here and there in my style, but I definitely developed a serious voice all of my own at that time. I never wrote another poem again without thinking about that poem in the larger body of work that I was going to do for the rest of my life. And it was just a big moment for me. Normally, when I read, it becomes sort of my signature piece. You guys all know that I was homeless, so I won't go through that story again. But normally the first poem that I read, just like Johnny Cash, "Hi, I'm Johnny Cash," I start out with "Where We All Sleep." And it was probably the first poem that I ever wrote that I was like, yeah, that's a good poem, all on its own. Whether anybody knows who I am or not, whether anybody knows any of these other people or not, this poem stands on its own. And here it is. I walked the wee hour through neon-lit part of town, past the tattoo man, his machine buzzing dragons and butterflies and other ink dreams, into college kids who have never been here before. The angels of the sidewalk pop their gum and yawn, strolling slow as morning fog. Then, abracadabra, they disappear into a stranger's car. I wave at Mouthwash Jimmy, his tired face split open, a Listerine smile, kicking hope-broken pipes, come to the place where we all sleep. Tammy is drunk and cursing, Big Baby sells his dope. The queers have just started cruising, and Red looks crazy for cops. Sleeping bags and church handout blankets stretch corner to corner. I sit down on the curb to untie my laces. The final encore of a concert at the ballpark across the river drifts down on me as I close my eyes to sleep. Early on, we were talking about stylistically, and I don't know, our voices. Early on, because I was so greatly enamored in my teens with E. Cummins. Early on, I didn't use punctuation or capitalization, and I thought that was cute, but it made it very difficult then when other people would read my work for them to read it like I wanted it read. And so, I couldn't, they didn't have the signals, right? And we find out that's why punctuation is so very important when we try to not use it. But,
Your pet peeve.
right?
It's his pet peeve.
You can get away with it, and certainly still I write, occasionally write, and wrote many more after that, where you have to use line breaks just right, and extra spaces, and da-da-da, and single words on a line to give that word emphasis. You can do it, but it's just not done as well. And what I did, though, is in that poem, where we all sleep with no capitalization, the I did the I. In any poem, when you go back, if someone ever went back, if I ever became the object of study, where they say, well, let's look at all his work and let's see what we can learn about him, what hints to believe. All the poems that are about my homeless period, the I is not capitalized. The I is less, right? And that's the way I felt. And that's the way so many people feel. I promise you, the meanest, angriest, cuss you homeless person you ever met is scared to death of you, and that's why they're screaming at you. You know what I mean? They don't want you anywhere near them because they're afraid to death of you. They've given up their power completely because they've given up their humanity. The most powerless person in the world is a woman who is homeless. Absolutely the most powerless person in the world. Men steal and women do what women do when they're out there to get by. And it literally becomes a choice for so many of them, the number. One person raping me continually or everybody raping me over and over again. It's a terrible, terrible life for them. However, in the time that I was homeless, it completely turned over. When I first hit the streets of Little Rock and other places before, every once in a great while you might see a homeless woman. And now it's the largest number of homeless in the United States are women with children. It's the fastest growing, that's not the largest, it's the fastest growing number statistically of homeless in the United States are single moms with children. Now, of course, they count the Salvation Army like that as homeless, but still it's no place to raise a kid. I promised, I mentioned that I would read, let me quit talking so fast. I would read some of the poems about my mental health issues because we share. Well, I guess all of us in this room now, right? So I'm not busting anybody out, but you know what I'm saying. So I tried to talk about it more symbolically than directly, so that it didn't sound like the kind of whiny poems that 15-year-old boys write right before they carry their father's guns to Columbine High School. But I will read this one called Blackbirds and tell you that it's about my issues with bipolar disorder, and then maybe at other times you'll read and you'll recognize some of the tips to those other poems that are about that. It's called Blackbirds. My thoughts are blackbirds with blue oil-sheen wings and mocking cries. They split open my head and fly en masse out into the world, a nuisance. They crowd tight-line wires of communication and jeer at me and everyone who passes beneath. Flocks of malevolence, twisting reality, flocking up my life, soaring untethered from limb to horizon to darker places, spreading sickness and dis-ease. Flocking blackbird thoughts, screeching and shitting on every shiny thing. If I'm reading too loud, tell me if it's too, because I'm so tired, my voice is going. And, so, okay. So, immediately in a repetition, the Blackbirds, but also a poem that I wrote about the technique of writing poetry. Why do you think there wasn't any alcohol then? I'm going to give you guys a minute to get in the door. No, not at all. No, you're cool.
Sorry to...
No. It's casual. We're all friends here.
I'll be quiet.
Not at all. And I hope you enjoy what you get over here.
Thank you.
This is called Advice on Writing from a Great Black Bird Near the Broadway Bridge, with apologies to Phyllis Levine. Now I should point out, maybe to Kenny, it's a thing. I don't know how the phrase for it, but it's a thing in poetry where poets take other poems and they take the first two lines of that poem and then they use those two lines and write their own poem following those two lines. It's a hilarious story that former poet laureate of the United States, Ted Kooser, tells, who does this a great deal, that he does it as a favor to improve the other poet's poem, and he's joking when he says that. But certainly Phyllis Levine, far better poet than I am, and certainly more recognized. Her lines were this: "Forget the comma," the crow said, darting onto another branch, random joy being his, from the poem Open Field. My poem, Advice on Writing from a Great Black Bird Near the Broadway Bridge. "Forget the comma," the crow said, darting onto another branch, random joy being his, and quit counting syllables and making da-da sounds under your breath. It's been done to death. Forget the rules of grammar and society's niceties, but rather fly. Leap, then soar, first with newness, then in homage to beat daddies gone before. You cannot be groovy while grounded, and creativity can't be seen from where the others are standing still. Ignore the ones who surrender that power to rule. Forget the semicolon, the letters capitalized, the couplets and the styles that scream nevermore. Fly, fly with your words, your scratching ink on clean white page, and forget the crooked fear that gives you pause on earth. And it's kind of cutesy with the nevermore and the blackbird, the raven,
That was
whatever.
one of my favorites.
Right, and a couple other things in there, but
That last line is extremely powerful.
literally, the crooked fear is the comma, right? The whole hesitation, and literally, if you go through and really look at it and think of it as advice on writing, it's in there. And I don't mean it in tongue in cheek when I say it. It was just a nicer way to deliver it without it looking like this homeless poet was giving advice to the guys that had read at the White House in Dublin already, but I was. I think I have some friends that are great poets. They're wonderful poets. They're amazing. They do the things that those guys that we talked about a while ago do. They write great, grand pieces that no one reads. And I don't see any value in that at all. I want people to be able to read my work and enjoy it. And I want Mouthwash Jimmy to be able to read my work and enjoy it, just like a guy that has an MFA in English literature. I want the most common man. I want to be the Waylon Jennings of poets. I want to be, you know what I mean? When I say I'm an outlaw poet, that's what I mean. I don't mean that I don't give a damn about the poets that came before me. I don't. I don't mean that that it's not important to learn what every rule of grammar is, so that you know when you choose to break it, why and where. When I say I'm an outlaw poet, what I mean is I will be bound by nothing. What I want to write is nothing more and nothing less than words that will make me immortal. And and I've not been a very good father to my kids. I haven't been a father at all to my kids. And I'd like, maybe if they don't forgive me, maybe their kids will think, well, I don't know anything about my grandfather except that he went to prison and he was a junkie and he was homeless, but they'll find these words and maybe they'll look inside a little bit and forgive me just a little bit for the life that I've lived. But I come by it honest. Addictions, and now I know, and we didn't then, mental illnesses, or whatever you want to call it. Those oddball gray area diseases that even the specialists aren't sure. You can get two psychiatrists to argue whether there's a real chemical imbalance or not a chemical imbalance. All they know is the behavior's wackadoodle, right? And it runs in my family. And this is a poem about something that happened in my childhood. It's called A Collect Call From. A collect call from a lifetime ago, the one phone hanging with its rotary dial on the kitchen wall above a set of canisters descending in size, flour, sugar, etc. Are you going to get beers?
Yeah,
Would you mind grabbing me one?
sure.
I don't care what kind. Flour, sugar, etc. Rang and let me start again because it's a confusing line there if you don't get the whole thing. The one phone hanging with its rotary dial on the kitchen wall above a set of canisters descending in size, flour, sugar, etc. rang in a tone like all the others. A collect call, my father talking in that clear, precise way that he used from the pulpit or in disciplining a child. Who was that? In those days, we did not often get phone calls. I remember my mother's concern. Hayden, my brother said, and he was the oldest. Father hanging the heavy Bakelite handset back in its cradle, gently as a newborn child. A quiet stillness settled on us, disturbing us all. You must never accept collect calls from him, he had told us, nothing else. Because it was Sunday and the service was over, we'd eaten our lunch and my older brother asked to borrow the truck to go riding around. Take your brother with you. And my heart leapt. Big brother shot me a look as we walked out the door. Who's Hayden? I asked, my chest pounding as he unhid his whiskey, mixing it expertly with green Mountain Dew. My own soda, a rare treat, clutched tightly so as not to get away. He's our cousin. Then why don't I know him? And he just shook his head. He was cool a long time ago. Used to come by and see me on a motorcycle. You're probably too young to remember. He's on dope. Just like that he said it. He's on dope. I only knew stories. Hippies jumping from buildings. They thought they could fly. Nothing else was said. And Big Brother was cruising. I stared out the window. Wind in my hair. All these years later, and still dirty secrets of good Christian families with cousins who fly, and all of the rehabs and a couple of prisons. I wonder whose children are taught to screen calls now. I just made it through it, and Hayden is dead.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I really like that one.
Yeah.
I didn't let go of your book. When he said he just got his hands on it for the show, he had.
Oh, I believe you. Yeah, that's funny to me. I'm pleased that that there are people that appreciate what I do because I take it very seriously. It is literally the most important thing in my life, and I would be dead without it.
There are two people that come to mind immediately who are very supportive, besides being Blackwater, are Silva and Ryan.
Yeah, I love them both a great deal. In fact, Silva, let me mention her real quick. It's such a great story. Silva was born and spent her early childhood in Beirut, and with bombings going off and girls being stolen, and you know, like the Ugandan girls by the soldiers and what have you. And as an early teen, too early to marry in our Western, modern way of thinking, a handsome Parisian, rich, handsome Parisian man came to town and stole her away, her white knight, and married her, and they lived a wonderful fairy tale life all these years. And she's, when I first met Silva, was mediocre. She wrote poetry like a housewife writes poetry. And in the last 3 years, she's really grown and by leaps and bounds and developed her own thing that she does. She's written in 2 of her books. In the first book that she did, she wrote a poem based on one of mine, like the Phyllis Levine thing. And this last book that she did, she directly wrote a poem about when I flipped out and went nuts, when I was coming down off heroin initially and fell in love with the Christian girl and all that you may have, if you follow me at all on social network. I really did. I didn't know I didn't know I was bipolar, for one thing, because I had been medicating for so long. I had one time been diagnosed depression, but even that was you know, I was smoking crack like crazy then, even when they gave me the meds. So you can't really, you know, of course you're depressed if you're on crack. You know what I mean? You're depressed because it's never right. You're either not high enough or too high. There ain't never no right, right? But anyway, I went through a lot of weirdness, and Silver wrote a poem about it, and I remember reading it and going, "Hey, this is me." You know what I mean? It was, but also Ryan is one of the last romantics in the world, and the poor bastard is such a romantic. He owns a brick and mortar bookstore, but you know, if it weren't for the older, more collectibles, he'd be out of business too. But I think he's great. The one he wrote, I can't remember the name of the poem, but he wrote about laying in bed and learning to drink wine with the woman he was so in love with. I love it. Speaking of that, because of you see how I do that segue? I'm good at this now. I do this all the time. Go ahead.
With the last hit of crack and no more money, and it's 3 a.m. and you done
Yeah, every hustle you got.
you pray for Xanaxes and you hadn't got any because the depression are coming off.
Yeah. And even if you can go to bed and sleep a couple hours, that's what I would wake up and cry. And I remember my first wife, and she was like, "Here's the thing, you don't just miss one day when you binge. You miss the day when you binge working, and then you miss the next day feeling guilty about binging. So, you know, you end up working 3 days a week, and I'm not going to stand for it anymore." But because of my writing and because of social media and reaching out to different people, I'm not going to say that I'm a rock star, but I have a couple of the same perks. I get a lot of booby pictures unsolicited from people. I don't know when that became fashionable, but apparently women don't mind sending you a picture of their boobs anymore.
Forward them to me.
But there's a woman in Los Angeles named Gina Nemo that you guys probably know through the same groups. And Gina is a semi-celebrity. She was married to Dom DeLuise's son, Peter DeLuise, that was in in fact, she was in the 21 Jump Street television show that Johnny Depp was in before he became famous. I mean, she's semi-celebrity. She's like hobnobby. But obviously, there's something wrong with her because she's attracted to me. And I'm telling you, I know. That's the first thing. When a woman is interested in me, I say, "What's wrong with you? The only thing you know about me is I'm a junkie, homeless guy, piece of crap, and I won't work, and you're attracted to me. There's something wrong with you, right?" But you know, because of her celebrity, and she's a very, very attractive woman. When we were chatting and talking, and she was trying to get me to go out there and all that, and my friends, are you familiar with the term catfish? Do you know what a catfish deal is? Do you remember the football player that thought he was talking to a young lady on the phone and on the internet, and it turned out to be a guy? Or many people will get in conversation. There's been a whole movie called Catfish. The phenomenon is when someone pretends to be something they're not on the social media. Let me get one more poem and then we'll go outside, okay? Because I thought, you know, I didn't know. And a friend of mine, we're eating breakfast, and you know, there's Gina Nemo just blowing me up. And so people are looking at her and they can't believe it. This is called Bad Breakfast at IHOP and Falling in Love. Could be one of them catfish slurping coffee with an accusing flare. I looked for the polyester Betty who'd taken our order and faded away into IHOP hell. You know, like that ball player, the Samoan kid and the queer. I screwed my face. First of all, you're a dick. And second, the fuck are you talking about? You say this chick did TV, and she's a singer and such. Jesus, just look at that picture. She's so out of your league. Her dad's some famous beatnik dude that kicked it with Frank. The hard-edged waitress whose mouth remained twisted into a speed-fueled grimace fairly through plates with bacon and eggs, burnt hash browns, and tweaked out of sight before I could ask for Tabasco. Have you seen this broad? You know, face to face. My heart ached and my stomach did backflips at the sight of egg yolks. Does she know you got nothing? She know you did time? Not for the first time I thought that booze made for strange company and leaned back and belched. There's no way to tell you that you'd understand. First, you're a dick. And second, she writes me these love poems. She's shown me her soul. I've been over the bad breakfast and ignored the look he gave. It sounded dumb, even to me, but I loved falling in love, and I do not poke bears. I think we're gonna smoke a cigarette now.
Yes, we
Right?
are.
What time is it, right? I
It
just
is-
wanna make sure we're,
Right, so I got,
2:30, okay.
2:33, so if we stay out until 2:45, then yeah.